Chapter 2551. This person's strength was actually so strong. If not for the mucus provided by Luo Qingtong, they would not have been able to do anything to these threads. At this moment, Yi Qianren's attack had not only sent them flying, it had also broken all of the threads. If it weren't for the obstruction of these threads, wouldn't all of them have died? Damn it, there was such a strong person among these mercenaries. Chu Tianming and the rest were shocked. At this moment, Gu Yifeng and the rest rushed over after killing the 1,000 silkworms. Chu Tianming, you people are really shameless. Chu Xiaofeng, Gu Yifeng, and the rest rushed over. When they saw Chu Tianming and the rest in the spiritual herb field, they were instantly enraged. These bastards actually took advantage of the time, when they were fighting the 1,000 silkworms, to secretly come over and pick the spiritual herbs. They were really shameless. Chu Xiaofeng was furious. When Chu Tianming and the rest saw them appear, they did not know why, but they felt relieved. They looked at Yi Qianxian fearfully, then straightened their necks, and looked at Chu Xiaofeng and the rest. We should have a share of these spiritual herbs. Chu Xiaofeng, although you saved us, don't forget that without us, how would you deal with those 1,000 silkworms? And these mercenaries beside us, didn't they also help you a lot? Chu Tianming and the rest said shamelessly. They took all the credit for Old Chun and the others' achievements. That was because Old Chun and the rest were their guards. If they helped Chu Xiaofeng and the rest, it was equivalent to them helping Chu Xiaofeng and the rest. Their words instantly disgusted Old Chun and the rest. Chu Tianming and the rest brought them here and almost caused them to die here. Now that they had helped Gu Yifeng and the others, it had instead become their contribution? What the F***ck? They had seen shameless people before, but they had never seen such shameless people. Chu Tianming and the rest did not care so much. They had already offended everyone here. Since that was the case, they might as well reap some benefits. Old Chun and the rest were their guards. There was no doubt about that. Since they had put in the effort, as the employer, they naturally had to get a share. Chu Xiaofeng and the rest did not expect Chu Tianming and the rest to be so shameless. Especially Chu Xiaofeng. He raised his hand and pointed at Chu Tianming and the rest. His mouth opened and closed, and the veins on his forehead popped. He did not know what to say. He felt that he had lost all his face as a descendant of the Tianfeng Chu family. Old Chun and the rest were even worse. They really wanted to rush over, to give them a vicious kick and then shout angrily, "I quit!" However, they were already the guards of Chu Tianming and the others. Unless Chu Tianming and the others spoke, they could only follow them. Thinking up to this point, the group of people felt terrible. The feeling of disgust in his heart was as if he had swallowed a fly alive. Right at this moment, Chu Kuer and Chu Yufei also rushed over after seeing that the battle had ended. Brother Chu, seeing Chu Tianming and the rest, the depressed and resentful expression on Chu Kuer's face was instantly swept away. She looked at Chu Tianming and the rest in surprise. After seeing that they were all injured, she did not think much of it. Chapter 2552. The 6th Elder's faction and the 8th Elder's faction were not very close. However, Chu Tianming and Chu Kuer's elder brother, Chu Yunfei, were close. If she had known that it was Chu Tianming and the others, she would not have tolerated that **th Luo Xiaoqi. Chu Kuer gritted her teeth as she looked at Luo Qingtong, who was still in Yi Qianxian's arms. Her eyes were filled with indescribable hatred and resentment. She had just arrived late, and did not hear anything else. She only heard Chu Tianming's shameless words. Hearing this, she immediately agreed. Brother Tianming is right. Chu Xiaofeng. Everyone worked together to deal with the 1,000 silkworms. Could it be that the 8th Elder and his people want to take all these spiritual herbs for themselves? As she spoke, her eyes swept across the lush spiritual herb field. There was an indescribable surprise and greed on her face. There were so many spiritual herbs. Humph! She must not let Luo Qingtong and the others get these spiritual herbs. Chu Xiaofeng was such a spineless person. He was a disciple of the Tianfeng Chu family. How could he listen to a mercenary? He was a disgrace to the Tianfeng Chu family. As Chu Kuer thought of this, she immediately raised her head and said, Chu Xiaofeng, Don't forget that we were the first to discover these 1,000 silkworms. If we didn't tell you where the 1,000 silkworms were, you wouldn't have gotten these spiritual herbs. We have to get half of these spiritual herbs. You can share the remaining half with Brother Tianming and the others. In this way, Chu Tianming and the others would take 3/4 of the spiritual herbs. How much was left for Chu Xiaofeng and the others? Chu Xiaofeng and the others originally thought that Chu Tianming and the others were shameless enough. They did not expect Chu Ku'er to be even more shameless than them. The place where they found the 1,000 silkworms? They told them where the 1,000 silkworms were, so they could get these spiritual herbs. Weren't they the ones who were killed by the 1,000 silkworms, and then cried and begged them to take them in order to let him and the others take them in? And Luo Qingtong needed these 1,000 silkworms. Was that why she told them the location of these 1,000 silkworms? Not to mention that these spiritual herbs were not picked up from the ground. They were obtained from the battle between Gu Yifeng and the 1,000 silkworms. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong's solution, they wouldn't know how many casualties they would have suffered. Now that Chu Ku'er's lips had touched, it became her credit? Chu Xiaofeng and the others felt like cursing, but they didn't know if they should say it. While Chu Xiaofeng and the others were angered to the point of being speechless, Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows and looked at Chu Yufei. Miss Yufei, do you also think that Miss Ku'er is right? After Chu Yufei appeared, she didn't say anything. She let Chu Ku'er take the lead. However, since Luo Qingtong knew her nature, of course, she would not let her be so peaceful as to be a peerless white lotus. She had to force her to express her attitude. Moreover, for Chu Ku'er to be able to say such words, she might have a hand in it. Luo Qingtong was waiting for Chu Yufei to speak. Today, she would solve all these problems together. It would save these people from circling around her man. Her current status was not suitable to deal with wild bees and butterflies. Moreover, she didn't like to waste time with these green tea bitches. Chapter 2553. In any case, unless Chu Xiaofeng was prepared to go against her mother, third elder, and sixth elder, they could only compromise. At that time, they would be able to get a bunch of spiritual herbs without any effort. So what if Luo Xiaoqi and the others tried their best? They would only be able to pave the way for them. Therefore, Chu Yufei was very calm throughout. But she did not expect that Luo Qingtong would target her as soon as she opened her mouth. What was she going to say now? Could it be that she actually agreed with Chu Ku'er's opinion? But everyone knew how shameless Chu Ku'er's words were. As soon as she opened her mouth, the beautiful image that she had painstakingly built up in the past was instantly destroyed. At that time, everyone would know what kind of person she was. Thinking of this, Chu Yufei gritted her teeth in her heart. Why was this Luo Xiaoqi so difficult to deal with? She hated Luo Qingtong thoroughly in her heart, but she did not show it on her face. She only bit her lips slightly and lowered her head with a conflicted and embarrassed expression. Sister Ku'er's words are indeed a little unreasonable. Chu Ku'er's face was filled with disbelief when she heard Chu Yufei's words. She looked at Chu Yufei, not knowing why she would say that. Wasn't she the one who taught her to say these words? Now she was saying that her words were unreasonable. Chu Ku'er instantly felt betrayed. No matter how stupid she was, the way she looked at Chu Yufei was somewhat different. And Chu Yufei had no choice. She gritted her teeth and continued weakly. However, although Ku'er and I can't get the spiritual herbs, Brother Tianming and the others should get it. After all, Brother Xiaofeng, we watched them enter the encirclement of those 1,000 silkworms, didn't we? Chu Tianming and the others jumped up immediately when Chu Yufei said that. Great. Chu Xiaofeng, you actually used us as bait to lure those 1,000 silkworms to attack. 70%. We must get 70%. Ku'er Yufei, don't be afraid. You can't miss out on your share. Chu Xiaofeng and the others actually watched us die. If you didn't say it, we wouldn't know. Chu Xiaofeng and the others must settle this matter today. Otherwise, we won't be finished. Chu Tianming and the others looked aggressive. Chu Yufei felt comfortable in her heart, but on the surface she panicked and said, Brother Tianming, don't be like this. Brother Xiaofeng and the others didn't do it on purpose. Brother Xiaofeng. She turned around and advised Chu Xiaofeng. Why don't you do as Brother Tianming and the others say? After all, we were indeed in the wrong in this matter. Ku'er and I don't want our share. As she said this, her face was full of sincerity. This gentleness and understanding of others. How moving! Ah! Luo Qingtong was watching from the side. She wanted to cheer for Chu Yufei's performance. What a gentle and kind white lotus. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong smiled and said, "That's right. Miss Yufei is right." Perhaps young Master Tianming and the others were in a hurry to die in the ambush of the 1,000 silkworms. We controlled them with our thoughts and made them go, right? What do you think? Luo Qingtong's words instantly silenced Chu Tianming and the others. They looked at Luo Qingtong, and their faces turned pale. They didn't know what to say. Luo Qingtong's words were too hurtful. With one sentence, she tore apart their and Chu Yufei's pretense. Chu Yufei's face turned red. She was about to say something to salvage the situation, but was interrupted by Luo Qingtong. Chapter 2554. Miss Yufei, you don't have to explain. Luo Qingtong looked at Chu Yufei, who had an ugly and stiff expression, and said with a smile, "I know that you and Miss Ku'er have a close sisterly relationship. How can you disagree with her opinion? What you said just now was just to save face for our young Master Feng. You don't want to make things so ugly for everyone, right?" Luo Qingtong's words made Chu Yufei's expression extremely stiff and ugly. Luo Qingtong's words completely wasted all her previous efforts. The reason why Chu Yufei said that Chu Ku'er's words were wrong was that she did not want everyone to think that she was as shameless as Chu Ku'er and ruin her image in front of everyone. She carefully maintained her image. Who would have thought that Luo Qingtong's mouth was so sharp? She easily laid out all her intentions in front of her. Not only that, but she also tore apart her mask. Chu Yufei could not refute Luo Qingtong's words. What was there to refute? She and Chu Ku'er were not close sisters? Didn't that mean that she was hypocritical, and that her defense of Chu Ku'er was all fake? But if she admitted that she and Chu Ku'er were close sisters, then how could she oppose Chu Ku'er's opinion? This was not something that good sisters would do. At the end of the day, she was still hypocritical. Not only that, she clearly agreed with Chu Ku'er's opinion, but she deliberately said that her words were unreasonable. Not only was she hypocritical, but she was also very scheming. Chu Yufei gritted her teeth. For the first time, she was forced to such an extent by someone, and she could not even fight back. Because no matter what she said, Luo Qingtong had something to say to her. He was just a young man. He actually guessed her words and thoughts so clearly, and even used her own words and attitude to block her from saying anything. She could only let the other party tear off the fake skin on her body bit by bit. Chu Yufei's expression was extremely ugly. She regretted it a little now. If she had known that Luo Xiaoqi was so familiar with these methods, she would not have been unable to swallow her anger and deliberately provoked Chu Tianming and Chu Xiaofeng. But now, he had completely destroyed his image. She really went for wool and came home shorn. Chu Yufei's expression was ugly, but Luo Qingtong did not pay much attention to her. She changed the topic and looked at Chu Tianming and the others. "You have too many people, and our young Master Feng is alone. He's no match for you, since you all think that this is our young Master Feng's fault. All right then, we'll compensate you with all these spiritual herbs. But at the same time, we also have a request. That is, you are not allowed to mention this matter in the future. It will damage the reputation of our young Master Feng. In addition to that, these mercenaries TS right now. After you get the spiritual to Chiu, Teat, to them to you to protect, Tease," said Qingtong. "Calm. TT, S to test T to TU to T2, S. In this case, you can distribute these spiritual herbs as you wish. We don't care." The moment Luo Qingtong said that, Chu Xiaofeng and the rest were shocked. "Xiaoqi, young Master Xiaoqi, this won't do." Everyone was excited and touched. They were touched because Luo Qingtong defended them. They were excited because they were not willing to let Chu Tianming and the others off so easily. Chapter 2555. His gaze towards Chu Yufei was filled with even more unspeakable hatred. She was really disgusting. Not only did she deliberately sow discord, but she also put on an act. Her attitude of persuading him to take out the spiritual herbs was really disgusting. If it weren't for her, Chu Tianming and the others wouldn't have had the chance to make trouble. This Chu Yufei, all her gentleness and kindness were all fake. In fact, her thoughts were indescribably sinister. Everyone's eyes were filled with anger. On the other hand, Chu Tianming and the others were pleasantly surprised. This was especially true for Chu Kuer. Her eyes immediately lit up, and she began to shout. Okay, Luo Xiaoqi, you said it. Chu Xiaofeng, you won't go back on her words, right? Chu Kuer raised her head and looked at Chu Xiaofeng. I remember you said before that her words are your words. Now, you won't go back on your words, right? Chu Kuer's face was filled with ridicule. Previously, when Chu Xiaofeng listened to everything Luo Qingtong said, she thought that his brain was really kicked by a donkey. How could he listen to a mercenary like that? But now, she was very glad that Chu Xiaofeng listened to Luo Qingtong. Otherwise, how could they let Chu Xiaofeng do as Luo Qingtong said? It was also Chu Xiaofeng's own stupidity that allowed them to have something on him. But the stupidest one was Luo Qingtong. She actually used these spiritual herbs in exchange for the protection rights of those mercenaries. Why? Was she afraid that Chu Tianming and the others would kill these mercenaries? Or was she afraid that these mercenaries would be at a disadvantage in the hands of Chu Tianming and the others? She was a saint, but it was a pity that Chu Xiaofeng risked his life to deal with those 1,000 silkworms. Now, these spiritual herbs were all taken advantage of by her and the others. Speaking of which, they should thank Luo Xiaoqi. Chu Kuer thought so and suddenly sneered. She was indescribably proud of herself. And Chu Tianming and the others thought so too. They thought of Luo Qingtong asking them to remove the protection rights of Old Chun and the others, and seemed to have found the reason why Luo Qingtong did so. Suddenly, they looked at Luo Qingtong, Chu Xiaofeng and the others with eyes full of ridicule. This Chu Xiaofeng was really a pighead. He actually let a mercenary under him make the decision. Now all of these spiritual herbs were theirs. Chu Tianming and the others were pleased with themselves. After glancing at Chu Xiaofeng complacently, they immediately said in a cold voice, Chu Xiaofeng, since your subordinates are so generous, then we will respectfully accept your offer. As for these traitorous mercenaries, it's up to you whether you want them or not. Naturally, we will remove their protection rights. For the children of the Tianfeng Chu clan, once they were selected as mercenaries, unless the employer agreed, the mercenaries under them would have to guarantee their safety. Now that Chu Tianming's group and Old Chen's group had been relieved of their protection rights, it meant that Old Chen and the others did not need to care about their lives. As for Chu Xiaofeng and the others, they were unable to accept Old Chen and the others. But if they insisted on following Chu Xiaofeng and the others and not joining their team, it would not be a violation of the rules. Therefore, Chu Tianming and the others all thought that Luo Qingtong was exchanging spiritual herbs with them for Old Chen and the others. And because of the previous beating, Chu Tianming and the others had long been displeased with Old Chen and the others. They were indeed planning to wait until they met up with the other children of the Tianfeng Chu clan before dealing with Old Chen and the others. Chapter 2556. Anyway, even if they left the abandoned continent in the future, they would have plenty of opportunities to deal with these people. They were not in a hurry now. Moreover, it would be easier for them to take action once they left the abandoned continent. Speaking of which, this young man named Luo Xiaoqi was really naive. Did he really think that they could not do anything to him after he escaped this disaster? Chu Tianming and the others sneered and removed the protection rights from Old Chen and the others. Both sides swore to the heavenly Tao. Soon, Old Chen and the others were free from the restraint of Chu Tianming and the others. They retreated to Luo Qingtong's side excitedly. The latter looked at the smug and arrogant Chu Tianming and the others, raised her hand and made a pleased gesture. You guys start picking the spiritual herbs now. As she spoke, she asked them to make way for the path to the spiritual meadow. Humph, at least you know what's good for you. Chu Xiaofeng, you really found a good subordinate. Much more generous than you. Then, it would be impolite of us to refuse. Chu Tianming and the others laughed loudly. Chu Kuer's head was even higher. She looked at Chu Xiaofeng and sneered. I just gave you a quarter and you didn't want it. Now you don't even have 3/4. You gave the control of your team to a mercenary, and a young man at that. Chu Xiaofeng, calling you stupid is already a compliment. If I were you, I would immediately kick this Luo Xiaoqi out of the team. Otherwise, I don't know what kind of losses you will suffer in the future. Of course, that's a matter for the future. Now these spiritual herbs belong to us. You guys just stay here and watch. Sister Yufei, don't you think so? Chu Kuo looked at Chu Yufei and said. After Luo Qingtong tore off Chu Yufei's fake skin, Chu Kuo regarded her as one of her own. It turned out that Sister Yufei did not mean to say that to her. She did it to show Luo Qingtong and the others. Unfortunately, Luo Qingtong and Chu Xiaofeng did not fall for it. As she said this, she suddenly felt hatred in her heart. Chu Yufei looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong. For some reason, he felt that something was amiss. This boy named Luo Xiaoqi didn't seem to be an easy person to deal with. Why would she suddenly give up on these spiritual herbs? Just for these mercenaries? Her gaze swept past old Chun and the others. Although he didn't believe it, there didn't seem to be any place where Luo Qingtong and the others had tampered with. Chu Tianming and the others were the first to arrive at the spiritual herbland. Chu Yufei thought about it and didn't think there was anything wrong with it. It could only be said that although Luo Qingtong was a scheming person, she was too soft-hearted in the end to actually use these elixirs in exchange for the freedom of these mercenaries. What a joke! Chu Yufei sneered in her heart. She felt that Luo Qingtong's soft-heartedness was laughable. However, she did not show it on her face. She only nodded gently at Chu Kuer. Her persona had almost collapsed. But so what? Chu Xiaofeng and the others had a grudge against Chu Kuer and the others. If she said that Chu Xiaofeng and the others deliberately slandered Chu Kuer because they didn't get along with her, who would believe Chu Xiaofeng and the others? As for Chu Tianming, Chu Kuer, and the others, they were idiots. She could easily trick them back. Chu Yufei didn't care at all. She just stared at Yi Qianxian. She saw that he had been holding Luo Qingtong until now, and showed no signs of letting her go. Chapter 2557. Chu Yufei gritted her teeth in her heart. She believed that her charm was not weak, and was much higher than that idiot Chu Kuer. However, this man, who she couldn't take her eyes off, didn't even look her in the eye. Previously, she wanted to take the opportunity to fall on Yi Qianxian, but the latter avoided her. Instead, he approached Luo Qingtong. How could Chu Yufei accept such an obvious difference in treatment? Fortunately, Luo Xiaoqi was a man. That man was gay, so he turned a blind eye to her. It was not that she was not charming enough. Chu Yufei felt much better when she thought of this. She forcibly shifted her gaze away from Yi Qianxian, then went to the spiritual grass field with Chu Kuer to pick the spiritual herbs there. Luo Qingtong had almost stripped her of her fake skin. She could not be bothered to put on an act in front of Luo Qingtong and the others. She did not even say a word of courtesy. She lowered her head and directly picked the spiritual herbs. She would not leave a single one of the spiritual herbs here for Luo Qingtong and the others. Let the other party pay the price for her generosity. Chu Yufei sneered. She seemed to have seen the scene of Luo Qingtong being reprimanded by Chu Xiaofeng and the others after she and the others left. After all, Luo Qingtong had lost so many spiritual herbs and had generously given them to them. How could Chu Xiaofeng and the others tolerate this? They did not make things difficult for them at this time, because they cared about their reputation and did not want to be seen as a joke. Chu Yufei was so certain in her heart. Suddenly, the speed at which she picked these spiritual herbs became even faster. The group of people picked all the spiritual herbs like a whirlwind sweeping away the clouds. After a while, there was not a single green plant on the grass field. Chu Tianming and the others were so crazy that they did not even let go of the weeds and pulled them all out. After doing all this, Chu Yufei, Chu Kuer, and the others left with Chu Tianming and the others. The two of them had already planned this beforehand. If it weren't for the fact that they wanted to leave with Chu Tianming and the others, how could they not give any face to Luo Qingtong and the others just now? Humph, Chu Xiaofeng and the others thought that they could only rely on him. Now that Chu Tianming and the others had appeared, if they followed them, they would be able to meet up with the others sooner or later. Especially since Chu Tianming and the others had just told them. On their way here, they saw another group of children from the Tianfeng Chu clan. It was a good opportunity for them to seek refuge with them. After receiving this news, Chu Ku'er and Chu Yufei no longer had any worries. The group left smugly. Chu Tianming and the others were about to say some harsh words, but when they saw Yi Qianxian holding Luo Qingtong not far away, they felt a chill in their hearts. They suddenly remembered that there was a super powerful expert here. Although they didn't know how strong Yi Qianxian was, it was obvious that they couldn't afford to provoke him. They were afraid that they would have to find the top children of their clans. Only the guards around the ladder would be comparable to this man. With this thought in mind, the group of people didn't dare to say anything more. One by one, they took the spiritual herbs and left quickly. Even Chu Ku'er, who wanted to make a fuss, was pulled away by them. Chapter 2558. Lil 7, I know you did it for our own good. But this is too easy for Chu Tianming and the rest. Chu Xiaofeng felt aggrieved. Chu Tianming and the rest were too shameless. If not for Luo Qingtong's offer to exchange for Old Chun and the rest's protection rights, Chu Xiaofeng would not have let it go so easily. With just Chu Tianming and the others, even the guards beside them did not support them, and they wanted to fight with him. They even dared to covet his spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. It was infuriating. However, Luo Qingtong had helped him so much along the way, and he could still get these spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Therefore, Chu Xiaofeng could only swallow his anger and almost choke to death. Gu Yifeng and the rest were the same. If not for Luo Qingtong's offer to exchange these spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs for Old Chun and the rest's protection rights, they would have already attacked. Chu Tianming and the rest were too shameless. As for Chu Ku'er and Chu Yufei, they were simply ungrateful to the extreme. Chu Ku'er was needless to say. They were the ones who begged them to take them in, but they sold them out in the blink of an eye. If they had known, they would not have taken them in. As for Chu Yufei, they did not expect her to be so two-faced. To think that they thought she was different from Chu Ku'er, they were just burdened by the other party. Everyone was furious, but Luo Qingtong's expression was very leisurely. What's the hurry? Who said they got off easy? Let me tell you, those spiritual herbs can't be used at all. Alright, hurry up and disperse. Get ready to work. Chu Xiaofeng and the rest were vexed and depressed. When they heard Luo Qingtong's words, they were instantly confused. Lil 7, what work? If not for the fact that Luo Qingtong's expression was very calm, and did not look like she was talking nonsense, Chu Xiaofeng and the rest would have suspected that Luo Qingtong was too angry with Chu Ku'er and the rest. Why was she speaking so strangely? Yes, young Master Shaoqi. All the spiritual herbs on the spiritual grass field have been plucked by Chu Tianming and the rest. What kind of work are we starting? The mercenaries didn't know what Luo Qingtong was talking about. Old Chun and the others, in particular, were both excited and moved. Originally, they were prepared to resolutely carry out Luo Qingtong's orders. But what were they going to do now? Everyone was both depressed and surprised. As for what Luo Qingtong said, that those spiritual grasses could not be used at all, they did not take it to heart at all. Those spirit grasses grew on these spirit grasses, and were protected by the 1,000 silkworms' threads. How could they not be used? There was an abundance of spiritual energy inside, so it was definitely a spiritual herb. Little 7th young master was purposely saying nice things to comfort them. As the crowd thought of this, they felt even more touched by Luo Qingtong. What are you guys thinking? Luo Qingtong looked at the thoughts and emotions on their faces, and was speechless. Did she look like someone who would suffer such a loss? But then Luo Qingtong remembered that she was Luo Shaoqi, and these mercenaries were not Su Yu and the rest who had been following her all the time. It was normal for them not to know her character. Thinking of this, she immediately said to Chu Xiaofeng and the rest, "Those spiritual herbs really can't be used. That's the beast lure grass that the 1,000 silkworms used to hunt prey and lure food over." Chapter 2559. As Luo Qingtong spoke, She raised her hand and pointed at the silk threads surrounding the field. Didn't you notice? The entanglement of these silk threads is exactly the same as what you saw in the open space previously. It's even tighter. There's more. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and pointed at the fertile land under the field. The nutrients in this land are much richer than in other places. And those bones, do you think they belong to the 1,000 silkworms? Hearing Luo Qingtong's words, everyone immediately looked in the direction she was pointing. Indeed, under the spiritual grass, where Chu Tianming and the rest had turned over the soil, the bones of some magical beasts could be vaguely seen. When these bones landed in front of everyone previously, they didn't think much of it. However, after Luo Qingtong's reminder, everyone realized that the appearance of these bones seemed to be different. Unless the 1,000 silkworms still had the mood to bury the corpses after killing these magical beasts, and casually build a cemetery for them, the bones gathered here only proved one thing. This was the place where the 1,000 silkworms ate. Damn! Chu Xiaofeng and the rest's expressions turned from dark to bright. Those spiritual grass were actually the beast bait grass that the 1,000 silkworms used to lure their food? Didn't that mean that whoever held onto those grass would be unlucky? It was no wonder that Luo Qingtong gave these spiritual herbs to Chu Tianming and the rest without hesitation. She even exchanged Old Chun and the rest's protection rights. Oh my god. Chu Tianming and the rest were probably going to be cheated to death. Everyone was excited and expectant. If Chu Tianming and the rest had not already gone far, they would have chased after them and watched a good show. It was 2F King satisfying. Brilliant. Really brilliant. Chu Xiaofeng gave Luo Qingtong a thumbs up. He felt an indescribable sense of exultation. Chu Tianming and the rest were too arrogant just now. Now that he heard that they were cheated by Luo Qingtong, and that the spiritual grass they obtained was a hot potato, he was instantly overjoyed. However, he soon felt regretful. Sigh, what a pity. Those spiritual grasses are beast-luring grasses. Otherwise, the spiritual qi would be very useful. As Chu Xiaofeng said this, Luo Qingtong immediately laughed. You think too much. These are just ordinary weeds. Because the 1,000 silkworms infuse their aura and power into the weeds at regular intervals, they look like spirit herbs. This spiritual qi cannot be absorbed by cultivators, Lin Feng explained. When the time comes, it will all disperse. That's why I said those spiritual herbs can't be used at all. Luo Qingtong's words made Chu Xiaofeng and the others widen their eyes. In other words, not only would Chu Kuer and the others be hunted down by the magical beasts, they would also not be able to use the spiritual energy within the spiritual herbs. Then they were more than just unlucky. That was simply bad luck. He was so unlucky. Chu Xiaofeng and the others' faces twitched violently. Yi Qianxian lowered his head and looked at the side of the young man's face that was covered with birthmarks. The light in his eyes was abnormally deep and flickering. He didn't know if the other party had noticed that her temperament was becoming more and more different from the original Luo Xiaoqi. Was it because she was by his side that she was unconsciously relaxed? Yi Qianming's eyes were solemn. An idea in his heart was becoming clearer and clearer, more and more certain. He only needed to do the final verification. Tonight, he would see how the other party would conceal it. Chapter 2560. Luo Qingtong had no idea what Yi Qianxian was thinking. At this moment, she was instructing everyone to pluck out the spiritual herbs guarded by the real 1,000 silkworms. It turned out that those 1,000 silkworms were all burrowing animals. The spiritual herbs they were guarding also grew in the underground caverns. Coincidentally, it was right below the spirit grass field. In fact, this was a very normal thing, because those 1,000 silkworms had to rest after eating their fill. And the place where they rested was naturally where those spiritual herbs grew. This way they could better guard those spiritual herbs. And those pseudo-spiritual herbs, in addition to luring those magical beasts for them to eat. At the same time, the remaining corpses were also the best fertilizer to nourish those spiritual herbs they guarded. Therefore, the real location of those spiritual herbs was under the pseudo-spiritual grass. Chu Xiaofeng and the rest searched around according to Luo Qingtong's instructions. Soon they found those hidden entrances. After entering, there were large patches of spiritual herbs hidden inside. The amount of spirit grasses here was countless times that of the spirit grass field above. Chu Xiaofeng and the rest were happy in their hearts. The depression they felt from being angered by Chu Tianming and the rest's shamelessness had all dissipated. If Chu Tianming and the rest knew that those spiritual herbs they had schemed and shamelessly snatched were actually fake and inferior products. Not only that, but they were also the garbage that the 1,000 silkworms used to lure those magical beasts to eat. What kind of expression would they have? It was a pity that they couldn't see it. Otherwise, they would definitely appreciate it. The group returned to the camp with a full load. And those mercenaries who were seriously injured by Chu Ku'er and Chu Yufei left with Chu Tianming and the rest. After knowing that Chu Ku'er and Chu Yufei had left with Chu Tianming and the rest, and had abandoned them, and given up their right to guard them, their faces flashed with joy and relief instead of anger. Because they didn't want to follow Chu Yufei and Chu Ku'er anymore. Of these two people, one was headstrong and self-opinionated, and the other was scheming, and went along with Chu Ku'er. The mercenaries didn't feel safe at all in their hands. Previously, they still had some hope for Chu Yufei. However, after hearing Gu Yifeng, Old Chun, and the others talk about Chu Yufei, Chu Ku'er, and the others' performance in the 1,000 Silkworm territory, everyone gave up. At this moment, they had gathered together with Old Chun and the others. Although they didn't have an employer that they needed to follow, at the same time, they couldn't enter Chu Xiaofeng's group and directly report to Chu Xiaofeng. But as free people, they could travel with Luo Qingtong and the others. In this way, it was equivalent to them joining Chu Xiaofeng and the others' team. It was just that they would not directly obey their orders. Of course, they were loyal to Luo Qingtong. The group of mercenaries was completely convinced by this young man. Previously, they had insisted on having Luo Qingtong participate in this mission, because they had taken a fancy to the role this youngster could play in this mission. However, they had not expected that Luo Qingtong would do so much better than they had imagined. Chapter 2561. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong, they simply couldn't imagine that they would have no casualties when facing those 1,000 silkworms. That's right, in Luo Qingtong's team, no one died at all. There were injured people, but no one died. Not only that, in Old Chen's team, except for those who died because of Chu Tianming and the others' rash advance and stubbornness, no one else died after Luo Qingtong's team arrived. Even the injuries were only minor. Because those 1,000 silkworms were trapped by their own silk threads, their lethality was limited. At the same time, everyone looked out for each other and helped each other. Compared to the other teams who swept the snow in front of their own door, this was much better. In Luo Qingtong's team, there was no strife or mutual scheming, because they knew that under Luo Qingtong's leadership, they wouldn't necessarily have too many casualties. Everyone worked very hard and helped each other. Once a person was entangled by a silk thread, before he was strangled to death, someone immediately cut off the silk thread entangling him, allowing him to escape. In this way, in Luo Qingtong's team, there weren't even many people who were injured after the battle. Many people were still too greedy and rash. They were anxious to kill those 1,000 silkworms, so they suffered some injuries. When everyone returned to the camp and counted the number of people and the results of the battle, they discovered this and were shocked. Especially Old Chun and the others. They had lost a lot of people. As a result, when they went back to check, Luo Qingtong's team had almost no casualties. The number of people who followed Chu Xiaofeng before was the same number now. In their opinion, this was very inconceivable. Because along the way, even if they didn't count the losses in the 1,000 silkworms territory, they had lost a lot of people. The number of mercenary groups had sharply decreased. But Luo Qingtong's team was different. Everyone sighed in their hearts. The people of the Red Flame mercenary group were really lucky. And those who were chosen by Chu Xiaofeng were the same. Fortunately, they were also on the same path as Luo Qingtong and the others. Everyone secretly swore in their hearts. Except for Luo Qingtong. They would not listen to anyone else. If Luo Qingtong told them to go east, they would never go west. Following young Master Shaoqi would give them meat to eat. The group of people happily divided the spiritual herbs. Their thoughts were incomparably firm. Luo Qingtong, along with Yi Qianxian and the others, was looking at the corpses of the 1,000 silkworms that were transported back by the mercenaries. Each of these corpses represented a set of meridians that could be recast for Yi Qianxian. Luo Qingtong attached great importance to them, and personally came to check. Especially the corpse of the 1,000 filaments worm. Luo Qingtong looked at Bei Qing and Feng Yu with a faint smile. The latter and the others kept wandering around the corpse of the 1,000 filaments king worm. They wanted to speak several times, but they were forced to swallow it back. It was obvious that Luo Xiaoqi would not give the corpse of the 1,000 filaments king worm to them. After all, if they could see that the corpse of the 1,000 filaments king worm was extraordinary, how could Luo Xiaoqi not see it? She would give them some corpses of the 1,000 filaments king worm, but not the one of the 1,000 filaments king worm. It was precisely because they knew that this was the case that everyone became anxious. Chapter 2562. Yi Qianxian's treatment of Luo Xiaoqi was beyond their expectations. Originally, he was completely indifferent to Luo Qingtong, but at this moment, he was simply indulging Luo Xiaoqi too much. He had been holding Luo Xiaoqi in his arms, and didn't let her go until they returned to the camp. Others couldn't tell, but Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others had been with Yi Qianxian all the time. How could they not know their master's temperament? Except for Luo Qingtong, he didn't care about other people at all. Why was he so nice to Luo Xiaoqi this time? Master, you mustn't do something wrong like replacing the original with a fake to relieve your yearning for the real thing. Even if Luo Xiaoqi was like an evil doctor, she wasn't an evil doctor. Master, please wake up. Everyone shouted in their hearts. Not to mention Feng Yu, who was more thoughtful. Even Bei Qing and the others, who didn't think with their brains, felt strange when they saw Yi Qianxian's attitude towards Luo Xiaoqi. What they were most afraid of was that Yi Qianxian would make a substitute. If the evil doctor found out, it would be over. More importantly, this Luo Xiaoqi was a man. Master, even if you want to find a substitute, you should find a woman. Everyone was indescribably frightened. Looking at the king worm and Yi Qianxian, they were aggrieved, but they didn't dare to say anything. Yi Qianxian looked at Luo Qingtong indifferently and said in a low voice, "These 1,000 filaments are all here. How are you going to distribute them?" He looked at Luo Qingtong, who said without hesitation, "We'll divide these 1,000 filaments into 3 and 7. You get 3, I get 7. This king worm is mine." In fact, Luo Qingtong didn't want to give all these 1,000 filaments to Yi Qianxian. But she was still Luo Xiaoqi. If he was too generous, his identity would be exposed. Luo Qingtong couldn't reveal her identity yet. Therefore, she immediately made her choice. In any case, there was no difference between leaving these 1,000 silkworms with her and Yi Qianxian and the others. However, Bei Qing and Feng Yu didn't know what Luo Qingtong was thinking. Everyone was extremely depressed as they watched Luo Qingtong collect the corpses of the 1,000 silkworms. Especially the king worm. He almost rushed up and snatched it. But when they saw Yi Qianxian standing motionlessly at the side, the crowd immediately withered. Not because of anything else, but because their master hadn't said anything yet. So how could they dare to act on their own? Therefore, they could only watch helplessly as Luo Qingtong collected all the corpses. Yi Qianxian asked Luo Qingtong, "What are you going to do with these corpses?" Hearing this, Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others pricked up their ears in an instant. Did their master want to ask Luo Xiaoqi what she was going to do with these 1,000 silkworms? If she didn't have any special use for them, he would buy them from her. If that was the case, it would be good. With this thought in mind, everyone's spirits were lifted. However, before they could be excited for long, they heard Luo Qingtong's voice. "Oh, this?" Luo Qingtong smiled. "This is for a very, very important person to me." Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianxian with a smile, and her eyes quickly circled around him several times. Chapter 2563. This kind of confession was good enough, right? When the man found out about her identity and wanted to settle accounts with her, she could use this to leave a good impression on him. and make him reluctant to punish her too much. As Luo Qingtong thought about it, she felt elated. She felt that she was too awesome. Yi Qianxian's eyes lit up when he heard her words. His gaze swept past Luo Qingtong's smiling face. For some reason, even the hideous birthmark on her face was pleasing to the eye, and he felt much more comfortable. Was she someone very important to him? His lips curled up slightly as he glanced meaningfully at Luo Qingtong's face. Then, without saying anything, he left the place. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others were still waiting for their master to discuss with Luo Xiaoqi how to buy the king worm. However, their master just asked Luo Xiaoqi a question and then left. Nothing. Everyone's eyes widened as they watched their master leave. They couldn't come back to their senses at all. Oh my God! Master, what the hell is wrong with you? Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others collapsed indescribably. Luo Qingtong watched Yi Qianxian leave with a smile. Oh, I got away with it. She was very happy. After giving herself a V sign, she happily went to check on the injured mercenaries. Luo Qingtong had elixirs with her, and they were quite effective. But she couldn't expose her identity, right? Therefore, her elixirs were useless, and she couldn't take them out. But it wasn't a problem for her. There were countless spiritual herbs on this abandoned continent. There was bound to be a way to cure the injuries of these mercenaries by combining them with each other. Luo Qingtong couldn't cure them immediately, but she could speed up their recovery. The heart of the continent would open soon. When the Tianluo grass appeared, she might need these people's help. Therefore, it was best that they were fine. Yu Miqian was left in the camp because he didn't have the strength and didn't follow Luo Qingtong to the Thousand Silkworms territory. When he heard what Luo Qingtong did in the Thousand Silkworms territory, his eyes darkened. He had seen clearly that it was impossible to take the opportunity to gain Luo Qingtong's trust. The young man was like a fish in water on this abandoned continent. His meticulous observation skills were simply terrifying. One had to know that this wasn't his full strength. Yu Mingqian's eyes were extremely gloomy when he thought of the inscription ability Luo Qingtong had shown in the Tianfeng inscription city, and the strength she had shown when she destroyed his inscription array. Perhaps he should change his strategy. After leaving the abandoned continent, he would immediately send people to capture her and bring her to the Central Inscriptionist Union. He was wrong before. He wanted to get his hands on the god's inscription before his foster father and the others found out. But she was so difficult to get close to. Shouldn't he let her experience a life and death situation before rescuing her? Wouldn't it be easier to gain her trust? Yu Miqian felt that his idea of impersonating Yu Xian was really stupid. Of course, at that time, he didn't know Luo Qingtong was so difficult to deal with. He didn't know that she was a woman. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have done this. But it wasn't too late to change. Yu Mingqian's eyes were cold. Chapter 2564. The only thing he didn't know was the identity of the man with the white jade mask. Who on earth was he? What were the origins of those people around him? What was the relationship between him and Luo Xiaoqi? Was it because of him that Luo Xiaoqi disguised herself as a man? Yu Mingqian's eyes were full of curiosity. If that was the case, he might have to guard against him when he attacked Luo Xiaoqi. Out of trust in his intuition, Yu Miqian could feel that perhaps Yi Qianxian would be the only obstacle for him to attack Luo Qingtong. If he had known that they might know each other, he would have attacked Luo Qingtong long ago. He would never have given her a chance to travel with Yi Qianxian. But fortunately, the two of them hadn't recognized each other yet, so he still had a lot of room to maneuver. Yu Mingqian's eyes were slightly cold. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his eyes, and then he quickly calmed down. At night, Luo Qingtong held her quilt and ran to Yi Qianxian again. She stood in front of Yi Qianxian's tent, pacing back and forth, thinking about what excuse she could use to sleep with Yi Qianxian today. Tut! It seemed a bit silly to use Yu Xian as an excuse to sleep with her. After all, it was not like before, when Yu Xian suddenly came over, and it was not easy to set up a tent in the middle of the night. She could totally set up a new tent for him to sleep in. Oh, I got it. Luo Qingtong's eyes lit up. She suddenly had an idea. Didn't Yu Xian have the identity of a boy toy? She said that he had a phobia of men, so it was safe for him to stay in her tent. After all, no one could harass him in her tent. So he could only live in her tent. And she was not used to living with others. Oh no, she was not used to living with Yu Xian. After all, she was taking advantage of him. Of course, she could only come to his tent. Wow, she was really a genius. Luo Qingtong thought happily, and gave herself a thumbs up in her heart. She immediately hugged her quilt, and went into Yi Qianxian's tent. As for why living with Yu Xian would mean taking advantage of him. But living with Yi Qianxian wouldn't be a problem at all. Wasn't that easy to explain? Yu Xian was someone's boy toy, but Yi Qianxian wasn't. Of course, Luo Qingtong had completely forgotten that she had taken the initiative to hold Yi Qianren's hand during the day, and was mistaken for a homosexual. In the tent, Yi Qianxian sat on the bed, looking at the reflection of the youth on the tent outside, his face calm and composed. He played with a certain ring in his hand, wanting to see how long the other party would be loitering outside, before finding a suitable reason to enter his tent. Of course, if she couldn't find a suitable reason, he would find one for her. For example, if the tent he made for Yu Xian suddenly collapsed for unknown reasons? However, Yi Qianxian believed that Luo Qingtong would find a suitable reason to enter his tent. After all, she was so cunning. Humph. Yi Qianxian snorted softly. As expected, he soon saw Luo Qingtong loitering outside his tent. She dawdled for a while, then rushed into his tent. Obviously, she had found a good reason. Chapter 2565. As soon as Luo Qingtong entered the tent, she saw Yi Qianxian sitting on the bed, looking at her from the corner of his eyes. The man's figure was tall and stalwart, almost occupying the entire rattan bed. He was wearing a loose black patterned brocade robe. Because he had just taken a bath, the collar was slightly open, revealing the firm and strong muscles of his chest. There were still some water droplets hanging on it, making the inner clothes slightly wet and sticking to the skin. It was really a feast for the eyes. Oh my God! This man was really becoming more and more tempting. Luo Qingtong looked away with difficulty. What to do? Before she knew that this man was Yi Qianxian, Luo Qingtong didn't think that he was good-looking at all. But now that she knew that he was her man, she really found him pleasing to the eye. Ah! She really wanted to pounce on him. It was a pity that she wasn't Luo Qingtong. If she pounced on him like this, she would definitely be kicked away by him and thrown away. Luo Qingtong's face was full of frustration. She couldn't even kiss, hug, and raise her man in front of her. Why was she in such a miserable state? Luo Qingtong cursed in her heart those people from the Inscription Association of the Federation of Inscription Masters, who made her unable to expose her identity, especially those men in black who were tracking her whereabouts. Then they walked in front of Yi Qianxian with a sullen face. At this moment, Yi Qianxian's cold and indifferent voice rang out. Envy? Ah! When Yi Qianxian's voice sounded, Luo Qingtong was stunned. She looked up at Yi Qianxian with a puzzled face. What envy? Her eyes clearly showed her doubts. Here. Yi Qianxian's lips, which were hidden behind the mask, slightly curled up. He raised his hand and pointed to his chest. Over there, the firm muscles and veins were extremely alluring. You envy? Yi Qianxian's tone was indescribably calm. Just now you were staring at me. Cough, cough, cough. When Yi Qianxian's words came out, Luo Qingtong coughed violently. Oh my God, I was caught peeping. Was her gaze so obvious? Luo Qingtong's heart was bleeding. Cough, cough, that I'm quite envious. After thinking about it, she couldn't find a suitable reason to explain her peeping. Luo Qingtong admitted that she was envious. In fact, she wasn't envious at all. She also's breasts. They were bigger and softer than his. Just as Luo Qingtong was trying to clear her name, she suddenly felt a hand covering her left chest. Then, that hand pinched her little bun, that looked and felt extremely flat on the outside, neither lightly nor heavily. He gave it a squeeze. Luo Qingtong was dumbfounded. She looked at Yi Qianxian, as if she had been struck by lightning. She couldn't come back to her senses for a long time. After pinching her breasts, the latter said coldly, Don't be envious. You can practice it in the future. His voice was incomparably cold and calm. His tone was also very calm. But that wasn't the main point, okay? The main point was that he was pinching her breasts. Luo Qingtong's small illusion pill could make people unable to detect that her flat chest was fake. But when she was touched, it still felt like her little white rabbit being kneaded and played with. Ah! Oh my God! Luo Qingtong felt the scorching heat from the man's palm on her chest. Her entire body stiffened. Chapter 2566. Bang! The curtain of the tent was abruptly pulled open from the outside. Then, a figure rushed in excitedly from outside. Master, we made the bed for you. It's done. Beiqing looked at the scene in the tent with a dumbfounded expression. He saw his master's hand on Luo Xiaoqi's chest. Luo Xiaoqi's face turned red and her body stiffened. Oh my God! What's going on? Beiqing opened his eyes wide in an instant. He looked at his master's hand on Luo Qingtong's chest and stared at it for a dozen times. Finally, he was sure that it was his master's hand. It was not someone else's hand, nor was he wrong. It was his master's hand. What Feng Yu said was true. Did his master really fall in love with someone else? And he fell in love with Luo Xiaoqi. Otherwise, how could he explain his master's behavior? Even they rarely touched their own master. Not to mention he did such an ambiguous thing to someone else. Beiqing thought for a while. Only Yi Qianxian had made an exception for Luo Qingtong. And now, Yi Qianxian made an exception for Luo Xiaoqi. Could it be that the evil doctor in men's clothing was master's true love? Now that he found Luo Xiaoqi, who was very similar to the evil doctor in men's clothing, he fell in love with someone else. Master, he was actually gay. Beiqing was dumbfounded. Yi Qianxian glanced at him indifferently. Without saying anything, he calmly took back his hand that was on Luo Qingtong's left chest and gently squeezed it. Yes, although her breasts felt flat to the touch. But it was soft. It was so soft, it didn't feel like a man's chest. Yi Qianxian snorted. He was almost certain in his heart. But he still wanted to make one last verification. Bring it in, he said to Beiqing. The latter was dumbfounded for a while. Only when she heard his words did she regain her senses. Master, no, young master. Beiqing looked at Yi Qianxian. She wanted to say something but stopped herself. She couldn't stay calm. Master, you really can't walk on the path of no return of being a homosexual. And the evil doctor is so good. You can't abandon her just because she's a woman. Master. Beiqing's heart was roaring crazily. But on the surface, he had a silly look on his face as he lifted the wooden bed behind him and placed it in front of Yi Qianren. Young master. Just as he made up his mind to advise Yi Qianxian, the man's voice rang out. All right, you can leave now. Yi Qianxian's voice was cold, carrying an unquestionable authority and command. Beiqing had no choice but to rush out with tears in her eyes. Feng Yu, what should we do? Master is really gay. And he made a big bed for him and Luo Xiaoqi to sleep together. That's right. What Beiqing had sent over was a wooden bed that was more than 5 meters wide. It filled up the entire tent. Previously, he thought it was strange. Why did his master suddenly ask him to make a wooden bed? And why did he have to make it so wide? But just as Beiqing was about to break down and run out, Luo Qingtong was also stunned by the big bed more than 5 meters wide. Well, brother, why did you make such a big bed? She couldn't help asking. The bed almost filled the whole tent. The space left was not enough for Luo Qingtong to sleep on the floor. Was she going to sleep at the entrance of the tent? No way. Chapter 2567. At this moment, Luo Qingtong completely forgot about the attack on her chest. Her heart was indescribably anxious. This man suddenly made such a big bed. Could it be that he didn't want her to sleep here? He was too cunning. It wasn't easy for her to find a suitable reason. But he actually used this trick. Luo Qingtong fiercely gritted her teeth. She really underestimated this man. When did he become so difficult to deal with? Where was the innocent and cute Yi Qianxian? Luo Qingtong's heart was indescribably gloomy. Yi Qianxian glanced at her lightly then said, I think the previous bed was too small. I can't sleep well. When he said this, Luo Qingtong instantly burst into laughter. Bullshit. Damn it, He slept so soundly last night. This bed was obviously made to guard against her. Luo Qingtong's heart was gloomy. She stared at the bed for a long time, as if she couldn't use her eyes to split the bed in half. Then, with a stifled heart, she picked up her quilt and turned to leave. At this moment, Yi Qianxian's cold voice sounded from behind her. "Where are you going?" "To sleep outside." Luo Qingtong's face was full of annoyance. Sleeping at the entrance of the camp was too undignified, and to be entangled to this extent, the man would inevitably be suspicious. She was definitely going to sleep outside. It was a pity that she had to stay up late to keep watch tonight. Forget it. I'll just take it as a contribution to the camp. As Luo Qingtong thought about it, she carried the blanket and walked out gloomily. However, before she could take a step forward, Yi Qianxian grabbed her shoulder. "Sleep here." Yi Qianxian's voice was cold. He didn't make this big bed for Luo Qingtong to stay up late with those people outside. Previously, he couldn't bear to let this person sleep outside in the wilderness. Now it was even more impossible. "Ah, really?" Luo Qingtong's heart was first happy, then shocked. She hugged her quilt, looked at Yi Qianxian warily and asked, "Didn't you hate it when I slept here before?" She had wasted so much time pestering him before, but could only sleep on the floor of the camp. Now this man actually wanted her to sleep on the bed? Did he see something? Luo Qingtong's eyes turned slightly, staring at Yi Qianxian's face. Unfortunately, the man's face was covered by a mask, so she couldn't see his expression. You know that I don't like people close to me?" Yi Qianxian's. This person had been pestering him all day. If it wasn't for the special feeling he had for her, he wouldn't even know how he died. Now she knew to use this matter to test him. Yi Qianxian's expression was cold. He thought of how this person had flaunted her existence in front of him. There were several times when he almost couldn't control himself and wanted to attack her. His voice was indescribably cold. "Anyway, the bed is here. Sleep if you want. But once you're out of this camp, don't come back in the future." Yi Qianxian's voice was cold. After speaking, he turned around and lay down on the bed. He didn't even bother to look at Luo Qingtong. His attitude made Luo Qingtong feel relieved. She thought about it and felt that she might be overthinking. Chapter 2568. Wouldn't she explode on the spot? What's more, she believed that she didn't reveal any flaws. At present, this man's identity was her biggest shield. As for why Yi Qianxian let her sleep here, perhaps it was because she got so many thousand silkworms today. Luo Qingtong felt a burst of joy in her heart as she thought about it. She went back and forth, thinking about all of her actions from the beginning to the end. Then she thought about Yi Qianxian's actions again. She found that although his actions were strange, he didn't find out that she was a woman. She immediately felt relieved. She turned around on the spot, and then ran happily to Yi Qianxian's big bed, and put down her quilt. "Brother, I'm coming up," she said to Yi Qianxian. The latter didn't pay attention to her at all. Swish! Yi Qianxian raised his hand and flicked his sleeve. The candlelight in the tent was extinguished by him at once. His attitude was very obvious. If she wanted to stay, she could stay. If she wanted to leave, she could leave. Out of sight, out of mind. Luo Qingtong felt even more relieved. She grinned as she pushed her blanket towards Yi Qianren's sleeping area. Then, she flipped over and laid down on top of her. If it weren't for the fear that Yi Qianxian would find out that there was nothing in her lower body if she got too close to Yi Qianxian, Luo Qingtong would have clung to Yi Qianxian's back to sleep. After Luo Qingtong's body lay down, Yi Qianxian's body shook violently. That was the feeling. In the darkness, Yi Qianxian's eyes were unusually bright. Previously, he disliked Luo Qingtong for being noisy and annoying, and he was worried about her whereabouts. He was very resistant to her existence in his heart. Therefore, he did not notice that every time the other party approached him, his body would always take in Luo Shaoqi's aura one step ahead of him. The first time she tore off his sleeve, it was like this. Every time she tried to get close to him, it was the same. Yi Qianxian deliberately suppressed the counterattack consciousness in his body. However, for powerhouses like them, if they weren't close to someone they were familiar with, they would be injured by his counterattack before they could even react. Even if he retracted his hand in time, the counterattack aura would still be reflected back to him temporarily. But every time Luo Xiaoqi got close to him, whether it was intentional or not, he could control the counterattack consciousness in his body very well. Not a single time, he reacted before he could react. This was incredible. Even when he first met Luo Qingtong, the girl was almost hurt by him. But she was cunning and changeable, she easily avoided it. But at this moment, his body instinctively didn't take the initiative to attack Luo Xiaoqi. It turned out that his body had already recognized Luo Qingtong before him. But he did not notice it at all. He thought Luo Xiaoqi teat. This person had been hiding it from him for a long time. Yi Qianxian gritted his teeth. In the darkness, his eyes were shining like obsidian in the dark. However, the light inside was burning hot to the extreme. At this moment, his back was completely exposed in front of Luo Qingtong. There was no protection at all, but his body instinctively didn't raise any awareness of defense. Chapter 2569. Luo Qingtong had no idea what Yi Qianxian was thinking. She felt Yi Qianxian's body shake violently. She thought that the man was not used to sharing a bed with her. She immediately felt more at ease. She had thought too much before. Luo Qingtong did not expect to be able to sleep on the same bed with him so soon. She was very happy. She smiled and stared at Yi Qianxian's back, then closed her eyes happily. She was already very happy to be able to sleep on the same bed with him. As for other little tricks, they could wait until later. Otherwise, if they were caught and thrown out, the gains would not make up for the losses. Besides, now that she could sleep on the same bed with him, wouldn't it be easy to do anything in the future? With this thought, Luo Qingtong fell asleep happily. After she fell asleep, Yi Qianxian turned around. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he stared deeply at Luo Qingtong's body. The youth's figure was petite. Lying on the spacious bed, she occupied less than 1/3 of the space. Because she was sleeping close to his back, when Yi Qianxian turned over, she seemed to be nestled in his arms. She was neither too big nor too small, neither too long nor too short. She just happened to curl up in Yi Qianxian's arms, and the man directly hugged her. Humph! Yi Qianxian snorted softly, then his eyes wandered to her face. There! A large birthmark almost covered half of Luo Qingtong's face. Under the moonlight, it looked unusually ferocious and terrifying. This birthmark completely covered Luo Qingtong's face. When others saw Luo Qingtong's face, their attention would be attracted by this birthmark, and they would not be able to notice her true appearance. Yi Qianxian was the same. He hadn't noticed what Luo Qingtong looked like before, and he had no intention of finding out what she really looked like under her birthmark. If that wasn't the case, how could he have been fooled by her for so long? That's right, it was a lie. Yi Qianxian was almost certain that Luo Qingtong was Luo Xiaoqi. This woman had deceived him for so long. Yi Qianxian gritted his teeth and took out a box of white powder from his storage ring. That's right, it was the kind of makeup used by young girls. This was also the reason why Feng Yu was so surprised earlier. Because her master never touched these things. This powder was obtained from Chu Ku'er by Feng Yu. There was no other way. Men like them didn't need to put on makeup. They could only think of a solution on Chu Ku'er and the others. Fortunately, Chu Ku'er and the others carried these things with them, so Feng Yu could easily get them. At this moment, Yi Qianxian was using this powder to cover up the traces of the birthmark on Luo Qingtong's face bit by bit. The impression of erasing the birthmark on the young man's face in his mind was too vague and vague. Now he wanted to see it clearly. Under his hands, the birthmark on Luo Qingtong's face was erased and covered up bit by bit. Soon, the young girl's beautiful and otherworldly face was revealed in front of Yi Qianxian. What a cunning woman! The moment he saw Luo Qingtong's face was revealed, Yi Qianxian could no longer restrain his surging and burning emotions in his heart. He leaned over and kissed her. Clang! Chapter 2570. Luo Qingtong was awakened by a hot and repressed kiss on her lips. She vaguely saw the face of the man in front of her in her half-asleep state. She raised her hand to wrap it around his neck and responded passionately. Oh, Yi Qianxian, She moaned the man's name between her lips and teeth. Finally, she swallowed it all into Yi Qianxian's mouth. Luo Qingtong's moans were different from other people's. Yi Qianxian had heard countless people's moans. In the past, there was no lack of deceitful people who wanted to climb into his bed by his side. No matter if it was a man or a woman, those people's voices had always been pretentious and disgusting. However, Luo Qingtong's voice was unusually sweet. This kind of sweetness was filled with love, dominance, and a valiant response that was determined to win. She had never been a delicate flower that begged for his love. Instead, she was a flourishing demonic flower that wanted to be on par with him and walk side by side with him. Why did this woman make people love and hate her so much? At this moment, Yi Qianxian really wanted to swallow her into his stomach. Luo Qingtong was half awake and didn't know whether this was a dream or reality. However, when she thought about her identity as a man and Yi Qianxian's indifferent attitude towards her before, Luo Qingtong felt that this was most likely a dream. She really missed that man too much. It wasn't easy to sleep on the same bed with him, but she actually had such a hot and lingering dream. However, this dream was really good. After all, if she couldn't kiss him in reality, she could kiss him in a dream. Moreover, this dream was so real. With this thought in mind, Luo Qingtong suddenly turned over and rode on Yi Qianxian's body. She mumbled and kissed Yi Qianxian in a daze. "Qianxian, I missed you so much." Her tone was domineering, arrogant, and a little indescribable grievance. Yi Qianxian was originally very angry at her for hiding it from him. The moment she flipped over and pressed him down, he was prepared to flip over and press her back down. But for some reason, when he heard her aggrieved words, the anger in his heart instantly surged like a flood breaking through a dam, flooding thousands of miles away. He coldly snorted and raised his hand to support Luo Qingtong's buttocks. He lifted her up and made her sit more comfortably on his body. Then he sneered and said, "Humph, I don't think you have anything to miss." If she missed him, why would she keep denying her identity? Even after discovering his identity, she refused to tell him who she was. As Yi Qianxian thought about this, the anger in his heart began to burn. He raised his head abruptly and bit the tip of Luo Qingtong's perky nose. "Hiss, were you born in the year of the dog?" Luo Qingtong's face was full of grievance. She was caught off guard. She was lying on Yi Qianxian's body and nibbling on him when he suddenly bit her nose. She instantly hissed in pain and raised her hand to cover her nose. She looked at him with teary eyes. This man was actually so cruel to her in her dream. He bit her so hard. Did he want to bite her to death? Luo Qingtong glared at Yi Qianxian. The latter snorted and ignored her completely. His bite didn't even leave a mark. How could he not know how much strength he used? Moreover, so what if he bit her? She had lied to him for so long. Shouldn't he bite her? Chapter 2571. Why did you lie to me? Yi Qianxian's voice was cold. When Luo Qingtong heard his words, she almost fell off his body. It was Yi Qianren who helped her up and made her sit back down on her own body. That. I didn't do it on purpose. Luo Qingtong looked at the man whose face was as black as the bottom of a pot. She finally understood why he had bitten her. F***ck. I actually had a dream. I even dreamed that he was going to settle accounts with me. How worried was she that this man would find out that she had concealed her identity? Luo Qingtong coughed lightly and quickly explained. Both of us have provoked enemies. Obviously, yours is more powerful. I did it for your own good. That's why I deliberately concealed my identity. Is that so? Yi Qianxian snorted with a noncommittal expression. When did you find out my identity? How long had this woman concealed it from him? That day by the river? Luo Qingtong said with a guilty expression. She inexplicably remembered that day when she had proudly told Yi Qianxian that her mouth was bigger than his. Oh my god. This man must have forgotten, right? Obviously, Yi Qianxian hadn't forgotten. He still remembered it very clearly. Oh, your mouth is bigger than mine? Yi Qianxian was so angry that he laughed. That day was when he had completely given up on Luo Qingtong's identity. Even though there were so many similarities and palpitations, Yi Qianxian could only let it go because he had confirmed the man's identity without a doubt. In the end, this woman had recognized him at that time. She had even lied to him. Her mouth was bigger than his? What did she take out? Did she have it? This woman really dared to say anything. As soon as Yi Qianxian said that, Luo Qingtong immediately pounced on him and nibbled on his lips. Okay, I was wrong. At that time, I didn't know who you were. Later on, Feng Yu said that he was looking for his wife, so he was anxious and mistook her for someone else. Luo Qingtong finally realized that this was her man's. It really wasn't her fault. After all, this was Yi Qianxian. How could she say something like that? Wasn't she just making things difficult for this man? However, Yi Qianxian's expression darkened when he heard her words. Very good. He squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. While greedily savoring the girl's fragrant breath on his lips, he gritted his teeth and said, You don't know my identity, yet you dare to say such words to another man. Did this woman even know what it meant to be reserved? Damn. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched at Yi Qianxian's unusual attention. Wasn't there something wrong with his focus? However, Yi Qianxian didn't care too much about her hiding her identity. Luo Qingtong naturally persevered and hurriedly said, Yes, I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Qianren, don't be angry, Luo Qingtong said as she gently pecked the man's lips. Her lips and tongue were small and delicate, easily prying open Yi Qianxian's lips and driving straight in. Yi Qianxian was originally still angry, but after her kiss, his breathing became chaotic again. This woman. He gritted his teeth. He wanted to teach her a lesson, but he couldn't resist her lingering and affectionate feelings at this moment. The girl's lips and teeth were soft and her breath was fragrant. Almost every moment was testing his self-control. Chapter 2572. Haha. Luo Qingtong's laughter was like a silver bell. She raised her hand and wrapped it around Yi Qianming's neck, passionately responding to his kiss. It felt so good to have this person by her side. It felt so good to be loved wholeheartedly by this person. Luo Qingtong didn't have to think about any schemes or escape routes when she was by his side, because this man would always tolerate her and love her. How could he be so good to her? It's a pity that this is a dream. Luo Qingtong was depressed and couldn't help but mutter. She could only get close to her man in her dream. She was really too aggrieved. Depressed. Just when Luo Qingtong was feeling depressed, Yi Qianming was so angry that he laughed. This woman, what did she mean by it's a pity that this is a dream? Did she think that this was a dream? No wonder she was so obedient. It made him feel that it was too unrealistic. Yi Qianming gritted his teeth and bit Luo Qingtong's lips fiercely, gently rubbing them. This woman, he really couldn't hit or scold her. It was really a predestined calamity. He fell asleep with Luo Qingtong in his arms in frustration. The next morning, Luo Qingtong woke up in a daze. Just as she was about to greet Yi Qianming, she was startled awake. Brother. Luo Qingtong stared at her sprawled body that was hugging Yi Qianming. She was about to go crazy. What kind of posture was this? Last night You're finally awake? Yi Qianming's voice was cold. The moment Luo Qingtong spoke, he had already opened his eyes. I also want to ask you, how long are you going to hug me? Yi Qianming snorted coldly. His eyes swept across Luo Qingtong's expression, and suddenly felt that it was good for him to pretend that he didn't know anything. Let this woman pretend to be a man to deceive him. Did she think that last night was a dream? Then she would do it properly. When Yi Qianming spoke, Luo Qingtong also remembered what happened last night. She caressed her lips and felt waves of pain coming from them. Luo Qingtong froze on the spot, as if she had been struck by lightning, when she thought of how she had wrapped herself around Yi Qianming like an octopus. Oh my God, are you serious? Not only did she have a dream last night, but she also touched Yi Qianming in reality. Did she reveal her identity or not? Luo Qingtong carefully recalled what happened last night. But she was too happy last night. After falling asleep, she had several dreams in a row. She didn't know which dream actually happened in reality. None of them. The marks on her lips. Did she bite herself? Or was it Yi Qianming who molested her? Luo Qingtong looked so conflicted that she even forgot to let go of Yi Qianming. Yi Qianming looked at her complicated expression and felt very happy in his heart. Let this woman know how it felt to be deceived by her in the past. Let's see if she still dares to do it in the future. Let go. Yi Qianming's voice was cold. It seemed that his movements were big, but in fact, he didn't use any strength to shake off Luo Qingtong's limbs and got up. Luo Qingtong came back to her senses from his actions, and she looked even more guilty. She peeked at the man's expression and felt so conflicted. Oh my God, what did she do to Yi Qianming last night? Chapter 2573. Her heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat, but she didn't dare to ask. Yi Qianming was wearing a mask, so she couldn't see if there was a mark on his lips. But when Yi Qianxian was washing up, his clothes were suddenly opened, so Luo Qingtong saw a red mark on his collarbone. Oh my God! Luo Qingtong's eyes widened and she jumped up. She didn't dare to look at Yi Qianxian's collarbone. Kiss mark. That's a kiss mark. Oh my God! Luo Qingtong felt that she needed to calm down. Kiss mark. She actually left a kiss mark on Yi Qianxian's body. Luo Qingtong didn't know how to answer Yi Qianxian when he found the kiss mark. Could it be that she accidentally took a bite because she dreamed of a drumstick last night? This excuse was too frustrating. Luo Qingtong thought about it and couldn't think of a good excuse or reason. No, she had to go out and hide first. She would think about it later. As Luo Qingtong thought of this, she immediately rushed out. That brother, I have something to do first, she said and left the tent with a swish. On the other hand, Yi Qianren leisurely looked at her departing figure. She snorted softly and raised her hand to cover up her accidentally exposed collarbone. This woman, let her worry and suffer for a while. Outside the tent, Beiqing and Feng Yu came to look for Yi Qianxian. Just as he walked to the door, he saw Luo Qingtong's figure rushing out in a hurry. She looked as if her butt was on fire. The two were about to greet her when they saw her red and swollen lips and the mark on them. In an instant, the two were struck by lightning. Oh my God! Beiqing's body trembled. He looked at Luo Qingtong's disappearing figure, and his mind was filled with thoughts. Feng Yu, his voice trembled, and his eyes stared blankly, his gaze drifting. Did you see that? Luo Xiaoqishi. Beiqing was about to cry. Oh my God! Master is really gay. How could he do that to Luo Xiaoqi? Master, wake up. You can find the evil doctor and ask her to dress up as a man every day. Master. Beiqing was going crazy. Feng Yu, on the other hand, was a lot clearer after a moment of shock. He had suspected that his master had a crush on Luo Xiaoqi, but the plot developed too quickly. With his master's temperament, even if he treated Luo Xiaoqi differently for the time being, it was impossible for things to develop to such an extent in such a short time. There must be something wrong with this. Let's go and ask Master, Feng Yu said and pulled Beiqing into Yi Qianxian's tent. Outside the camp, Luo Qingtong ran out and found that she had accidentally run far away. Now she was a long distance away from the camp, but she didn't care very much, because she had told Chu Xiaofeng and the others not to leave the camp these 2 days and let the wounded rest for 2 days. And Chu Xiaofeng and the others also needed to sort out what they had gained during this period, so they all agreed. Luo Qingtong was not worried that she couldn't find him after running far away. She was depressed because she didn't know how to face Yi Qianxian when she went back. Damn it, it was killing her. She only hoped that man didn't find that there was something wrong with her collarbone. Chapter 2574. Luo Qingtong covered her face. She no longer had any hope for her moral integrity that had fallen to the ground. She seriously recalled the dream she had last night to see if there was anything that could be remedied. At this moment in her mind, an extremely sharp and mournful cry suddenly resounded. This is... Feeling the sharp cry in her mind, Luo Qingtong's eyes were stunned at first, then suddenly became extremely sharp. This is Snowball's voice. For a long time, the connection between Luo Qingtong and Snowball had been cut off. In the past, Luo Qingtong thought that it was because Snowball had disappeared with Chu Lingfeng and was too far away from her, so she didn't pay much attention to it. But ever since she saw Chu Lingfeng and Snowball in the sky above the abandoned continent, Luo Qingtong knew that someone had blocked the connection between her and Snowball. At this moment, Snowball's cry was sharp and mournful, as if it was weeping blood. In an instant, Luo Qingtong thought that something might have happened to it and Chu Lingfeng. Swish! Luo Qingtong's figure instantly rushed in the direction of Snowball's cry of blood. She didn't know what Snowball had done, but it broke through the barrier of their connection and directly screamed in her mind. At the same time, Luo Qingtong could also sense Snowball's position. Her figure swept through the air, and almost instantly, she opened her pair of bloody eyes. Swish! While Luo Qingtong was rushing over, somewhere in the abandoned continent, Chu Lingfeng and Snowball were surrounded by a group of people, both covered in blood. Haha, Chu Lingfeng, you fool. How could you be so gullible? I just casually told you that there are spiritual herbs here that can heal broken limbs and regenerate arteries and veins. And you actually rushed here. Haha, what an idiot. Chu Yuqing looked at Chu Lingfeng and Snowball in the middle of the forest, his face filled with indescribable pride. Chu Lingfeng, this idiot, was indeed brainless. He believed whatever she said. How could a spirit herb that could regenerate a severed limb and completely recover without any loss of strength be found in a 6-star region? Not to mention in this abandoned continent. This Chu Lingfeng is really as stupid as a pig. However, this was also good. If he wasn't so stupid, he wouldn't have been able to set up an ambush and capture him. This trip to the abandoned continent was their only chance to kill Chu Lingfeng. He was highly valued by the patriarch and the elders of the clan. No matter who it was, they couldn't do anything to him. However, things were different in this abandoned continent. There were many dangers here, and life and death were up to fate. If they killed Chu Lingfeng, then arranged for him to be killed by a horde of magical beasts, who would know that they were the ones who did it? Chu Yuqing was very proud of himself. He looked at Chu Lingfeng, as if he were looking at a dead man. At this time, Chu Lingfeng was desperately rushing in a certain direction, completely ignoring the attacks of Chu Yuqing and the others. When he heard Chu Yuqing's words, he suddenly stopped. Then, he looked at Chu Yuqing with a fierce expression and said, "What did you say?" Chapter 2575. Chu Lingfeng's expression was ferocious, his aura ferocious. Chu Yuqing had said so much just now, but he'd treated it as a fart. But now, he couldn't take Chu Yuqing's words any longer. That elixir wasn't here? Then how was he going to treat his master's grandfather's legs? Chu Lingfeng was furious. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles creaked. He'd been ignoring Chu Yuqing and the others' attacks, but now he turned his head and glared fiercely at them. These bastards, they dared to trick him. Chu Lingfeng had a one-track mind. Ever since he'd arrived at the Tianfeng Chu clan, he'd been asking around for elixirs that could help old Master Luo recover his legs. But even the Tianfeng Chu clan, a great clan in the 6-star region, didn't have that kind of elixir. Chu Lingfeng had no choice but to keep it in mind. He'd see where he could get it in the future. But who would have thought that Chu Yuqing and the others would use this against him? Chu Lingfeng's heart was both depressed and furious. It wasn't because he'd been tricked, but because this elixir was fake. This way, he wouldn't be able to bring this elixir back to his master. These bastards, they all deserve to die. In Chu Lingfeng's eyes, these people could casually deal with him and call him an idiot. But if anyone dared to joke about Luo Qingtong, he'd kill them. Chu Yuqing and the others had touched his reverse scale. Humph, so what if I tricked you? Who told you to be an idiot? Seeing Chu Lingfeng's murderous gaze, Chu Yuqing sneered. The other party was already a turtle in their jar. Yet he still dared to look at him like that. Did he really think that he couldn't be killed? But now that he'd fallen into their hands, even if Chu Lingfeng really had an immortal body, they'd kill him right here and now. Speaking of which, it was Chu Lingfeng himself who was stupid. This time, he didn't want any guards to follow him, giving them a chance to make a move. Chu Yuqing didn't know that this was because Chu Lingfeng had been preparing to leave the Chu clan after leaving the abandoned continent. That was why he hadn't sent any guards with him. He assumed that Chu Yuqing was just being stupid. He had a smug smile on his face. Chu Lingfeng, you fool. You shouldn't be the young master of the Chu clan. Just based on a brainless thing like you. What right do you have to occupy the position of the Chu clan's young master? That position should have been mine. He's from our third elder's faction. Just wait and die here obediently. After you die, our third elder's people will return to the main branch. At that time, I will be the new young master. Right, I forgot to tell you. Chu Yuqing's words were filled with malice. Madam Xing has already agreed to fully support our third elder's faction. And the condition is to send that bitch of a mother of yours to accompany you in hell. Don't worry, when the time comes, we'll let you and your mother reunite in hell. Haha. Chu Yuqing's words were filled with indescribable savagery. This time, he'd been able to successfully trap Chu Lingfeng, and trap him in their encirclement partly because of Bai Xing. The guards by his side had all been carefully selected by Bai Xing and sent to his side. Otherwise, their third elder's faction wouldn't have been able to completely fool the other elders. Chapter 2576. The people she'd sent to his side all obeyed his orders to kill Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, even if he'd surrounded Chu Lingfeng, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to this monstrous man. After all, Chu Lingfeng's regenerative abilities were simply astonishing. And the more he fought, the stronger he became. He wasn't that easy to kill. But now, Chu Lingfeng was destined to die at his hands. Chu Yuqing's voice was savage, but Chu Lingfeng's eyes were already completely red. You dare have designs on my mother? You all deserve to die. His voice roared. In an instant, he braved the attacks of Chu Yuqing and the others and charged at them like a mad bull. Young Master Yuqing, get out of the way! One of Chu Yuqing's guards shouted in a low voice. He raised his hand and pulled Chu Yuqing behind him. Then, wave after wave of attacks suppressed Chu Lingfeng's figure, which had rushed forward once again. They were all guards assigned to the top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan. Their strength was much higher than that of ordinary mercenaries, and they were all solitary experts. Now that they'd launched their attacks, even with Chu Lingfeng's regenerative abilities and bloodline abilities, he couldn't withstand their attacks. He was immediately pushed back into the center of the encirclement. Haha, Chu Lingfeng, you idiot. You still want to kill me? Wait until you're underground, then slowly think about it. Chu Yuqing sneered as he stood behind the guards. Send a group of people to lure over that magical beast horde we've been eyeing. Wait until his bloodline power is almost exhausted. Then let those magical beasts trample him to death. When that time comes, let's see who can trace it back to us. Chu Yuqing ordered. Yes, the guards obeyed his orders. Immediately, a group of experts among the guards broke away and rushed outside. When they were scheming against Chu Lingfeng, they had already set their sights on a group of magical beasts nearby. Luring Chu Lingfeng over would definitely cause him to be dismembered and devoured by those magical beasts, when his bloodline power was exhausted, and he was heavily injured. Behind Chu Lingfeng, Snowball was kneeling on the ground. Its fur was dyed with blood, and its cries were indescribably mournful. From the very beginning, it had been attacked by Chu Lingfeng and the others in order to prevent it from escaping with Chu Yuqing and the others. At this moment, its right leg was dangling on the ground. It was clearly broken and could not get up at all. However, Chu Yuqing and the others didn't pay any attention to it. They only focused on attacking Chu Lingfeng, vowing to kill him here and now. At this moment, Luo Qingtong's figure was approaching the forest. In this abandoned continent, she had fully opened her blood-red eye. It was as if she had a holographic map of this abandoned continent in her eyes. She easily analyzed the fastest and shortest route to this place. Because of her blood-red eye, and Luo Qingtong's own powerful concealment abilities, she was able to easily escape. Almost without making a sound, Luo Qingtong passed through the territory of countless magical beasts and plants. She avoided their existence and appeared in the vicinity of this forest. Boom boom boom. On the other side of the forest, the guards Chu Yuqing had sent out to lure those magical beasts were doing their best to defend and attack them. Chapter 2577. These people were the best of the best among Chu Yuqing's bodyguards. They had to lure these magical beasts, but they couldn't be injured. They couldn't allow Chu Lingfeng's encirclement to slip through, because there were too many of them. The ones who'd been sent to lure these magical beasts were all the best of the best. Their combined strength was at least of the 6th level of the human martial realm. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that it was difficult to find lone practitioners at the 9th level of the human martial realm to take on the task of guarding the bodyguards of these top disciples of the Tianfeng Chu clan, would all be experts at the 8th or 9th level of the human martial realm. However, experts at the 7th or 8th level were enough to show disdain for the crowd. The group of figures dashed madly through the dense forest, followed by a pack of enraged magical beasts. Luo Qingtong's figure appeared at the edge of the dense forest. When she saw these people luring the magical beasts in the direction of Chu Yuqing's group, she keenly sensed that these people were heading for the same destination as her. This was getting interesting. Seeing these people attack the magical beasts without harming them, only focusing on luring them away, Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes and quickly guessed their intentions. After all, this time, Chu Lingfeng hadn't brought any bodyguards with him to this abandoned continent. These bodyguards definitely weren't his people. They were luring the magical beasts in the direction of Snowball. In Luo Qingtong's mind, the words "kill with a borrowed knife," "destroy the corpses and destroy the evidence" flashed through her mind. She narrowed her eyes and glanced in the direction where those people had left. Then she quietly left the place. Swish! Luo Qingtong's figure appeared in the distance in front of those people. The blood-red pupils in her eyes spun violently, quickly predicting the most likely route they would take. Then, she raised her hand, and an invisible thread shot out from her hand. In an instant, a huge net of crisscrossing threads appeared in front of Luo Qingtong. These threads were extracted by Luo Qingtong from the corpses of the 1,000 silkworms. It was originally intended to be used to forge Yi Qianxian's meridians. However, this was an urgent matter, so he couldn't care less. Besides, Luo Qingtong still had the insect treasure from the giant king worm. That was the real treasure for Yi Qianming to forge his meridians. These threads were only used as backups. It was not a big deal to use some of them. Luo Qingtong's speed was extremely fast. She quickly set up the huge net trap in front of her. With a leap, she leaped onto the top of an ancient tree and hid there, waiting for the guards to lure the magical beasts over. And after she was done, the guards quickly lured the magical beasts over. Rumble! In the dense forest, a loud sound rang out. It was the sound of heavy hooves stomping on the ground. These magical beasts looked like black rhinoceroses. Their bodies were covered in thick rock-like armor, and their mouths were filled with sharp teeth. They looked extremely terrifying. At this moment, under the lure of the guards, they were rushing in the direction of Luo Qingtong. However, just as the guards were about to rush into the huge net of threads set up by Luo Qingtong, the magical beasts suddenly stopped. They looked warily at the place where the huge net of threads was, then turned around and ran in the direction they came from. They had already discovered the danger. Chapter 2578. Seeing this scene, Luo Qingtong frowned. She hadn't expected these magical beasts to have such a strong sense of danger. They had actually discovered the danger so easily. It was also because she had been in too much of a hurry that she hadn't had time to remove the scent of the 1,000 silkworms from the threads. Now that the magical beasts had left, would the guards realize that something was wrong? She looked at the guards. The guards also stopped in their tracks. However, they didn't think that there would be any danger in the surroundings. The group had set up an ambush in this dense forest and had carefully surveyed the surroundings. They had even checked all the dangers in the surroundings. Moreover, with their strength, if there was any danger in the vicinity, how could they not have detected it? Therefore, the strange movements of the magical beasts were seen as part of their plan. When the magical beasts saw that they were deliberately luring them, they became vigilant and refused to move forward. Seeing that the magical beasts were about to run further and further away, completely ignoring their bait, the guards became anxious. They had gone to great lengths to trap Chu Lingfeng in this dense forest. It was very likely that this was their only chance. If they missed this chance, they wouldn't be able to make a move against Chu Lingfeng. After escaping the encirclement, he would definitely leave this abandoned continent. At that time, when he returned to the Tianfeng Chu clan and told them about the ambush, they would all be finished, including Chu Yuqing. How could this be? The hearts of the guards sank. Try using this. Miss Ku'er and the others brought it. It's said that it was this that caused them to be hunted down by the magical beasts of the abandoned continent. As a guard spoke, he took out a handful of emerald green spiritual grass. Luo Qingtong looked at the extra spiritual herbs in his hand and blinked her eyes. Damn! It couldn't be right? Wasn't this the spiritual grass that she had tricked Chu Ku'er and the others into taking away? The beast-baiting grass? It had actually appeared in the hands of these guards. Could it be that the people these guards were loyal to had some relationship with Chu Ku'er and the others? But Chu Ku'er and the others were really lucky. They had been chased by the magical beasts with the beast-baiting grass and hadn't died. Not only that, he even met the person who was going against Chu Lingfeng. However, it was fortunate that they met the people who were dealing with Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, how would these people be able to lure those magical beasts back? How could his own design succeed? Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She had just wanted to jump out and use herself as a bait to lure those people into the net trap. However, with his sudden appearance and the abnormal behavior of those magical beasts, there was a high probability that these people would discover that he had done something. At that time, they would not be fooled. Even if she used all her trump cards, she might not be able to kill all of them. But now, with the beast-luring grass provided by Chu Ku'er, Luo Qingtong only needed to watch them step into the trap. Therefore, after Luo Qingtong saw the beast-luring grass, she decisively hit herself again. The guards took the beast-luring grass and went to lure the magical beasts in batches. The lure of the beast-luring grass was mixed with their attacks, and sure enough, those magical beasts that had left returned. Rumble. Chapter 2579. This time, the magical beasts that were tempted by the beast-luring grass to the point that they lost their minds and only knew how to charge forward madly, did not discover the danger in front of them. Together with the guards, they rushed madly towards the huge net trap. Boom, boom, boom. The guards held the beast-luring grass high and were only prepared to pass through the forest below Luo Qingtong. However, when they rushed to the middle of the forest, in an instant, streams of blood splashed out. The silk threads of the 1,000 silkworms turned into the coldest and most terrifying killing weapons, cutting their limbs and bones, along with their heads and necks, into pieces. Countless pieces of corpses rose from the crisscrossing huge net. Luo Qingtong's net trap was much tighter than those made by the 1,000 silkworms before. Under her blood-red eyes, these net traps had no blind spots at all. Those silk threads seemed to have been precisely calculated by someone, appearing at the places that the guards had to pass through, cutting their bodies from top to bottom. In an instant, blood flowed like a river, fog rose into the air, and the surrounding forest was dyed into a bloody color. These experts at the 7th or 8th level of the human martial realm, even in death, did not expect that they would be killed by a trap set by someone else when they set up a trap to kill Chu Lingfeng. Their corpses were dismembered in mid-air. Some of the stronger ones did not die after being cut up for a while, and could only stare at everything in the forest. They saw that under the soaking and splashing of their blood, the huge net lines entwined in the forest were revealed, like a huge mouth of a magical beast that chose people to devour, completely swallowing their bodies. And in this bloody scene, a young man wearing a light blue robe fell from the top of a tree. TSK, if it's not red clothes, then it's easy to get dirty, they heard the young man say with disdain. The appearance on her face was covered by more than half of the birthmark, looking both ferocious and terrifying. Landing in this bloody scene, she was like a demon god that destroyed the world. However, the smile on her lips was extremely evil and bewitching. It gave people a feeling that there was nothing wrong with it. Whether it was the ugliness or the malevolence on her face, it all turned into a perfect contrast to her peerless charm. People could only see her unparalleled elegance and neglect everything else. This was an extremely beautiful and enchanting young man. He had a demonic charm that seeped into his bones. With a single glance, one would be captivated and bewitched. Shua. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and brushed away the blood mist. When the guards were cut to death, the strong aura of death and the smell of blood covered the aura of the beast-luring grass, causing them to regain their rationality in an instant. At that moment, as they looked at the giant blood-colored net before them, their 4 hooves began to incessantly dig into the ground as they desperately tried to stop their footsteps. However, their momentum was too strong, and they couldn't stop for a while. However, Luo Qingtong had no intention of letting them all die here. She still had great use for these magical beasts. Therefore, after she brushed away the blood mist, she raised her hand and whipped. In the blink of an eye, the giant crimson net that was constructed by her was torn apart and scattered in all directions. Bang! Chapter 2580. The beasts had just escaped death and were about to scatter in all directions. However, the threads in Luo Qingtong's hands seemed to have grown eyes and didn't care which direction they were going. Those blood-colored threads shot out at the first instant and blocked their path. The magical beasts that had rushed to the front were the first to have their limbs cut off by those threads, and their flesh cut open. There was no other way. Those magical beasts that wanted to scatter and flee could only gather together again. Luo Qingtong used those blood-colored threads to drive them in the direction of Chu Lingfeng and the others. Moreover, because of Luo Qingtong's drive and the threat of the threads, their emotions were even crazier and more impulsive than before. They charged towards Chu Yuqing and the others with an imposing momentum that seemed to be able to move mountains and rivers. Rumble. In the dense forest, a rumbling sound reverberated through the sky. Because Luo Qingtong's ambush and killing of those guards had been extremely clean and efficient. Those guards didn't even know that they had fallen into a trap until they died, so they didn't even let out a single scream. The entire process was indescribably silent. No one knew that an extreme massacre had just taken place in this dense forest. Swoosh! Luo Qingtong's figure rushed out and followed behind those magical beasts, silently rushing forward. While Luo Qingtong drove those magical beasts away, Chu Ku'er, Chu Yufei, and the others were waiting on a hillside outside the dense forest, gazing into the distance at the scene in the dense forest. Hearing the earth-shaking footsteps, Chu Ku'er's face was full of joy. Haha, it must be my big brother who summoned those magical beasts. Chu Ku'er's face was full of pride and satisfaction. Big brother and the others must have succeeded. That Chu Lingfeng was dead for sure. Once he died, her big brother would obtain the Tianluo grass from this trip to the abandoned continent, and there would be hope for their third elder's bloodline to return to the main line. After his elder brother consumed the Sky Luo grass and obtained the immortal spirit body, his cultivation speed increased greatly. In the future, who in the Tianfeng Chu clan would be able to compete with them? As for her, the third miss of the Tianfeng Chu family, who would be able to deal with her then? That Luo Shaoqi and Chu Xiaofeng, she must teach them a lesson. Thinking of these two people, Chu Ku'er's face turned ugly. She had left in a hurry after obtaining the beast-luring grass with Chu Tianming and the rest. Originally, they were afraid that Chu Xiaofeng and the others would go back on their word and snatch the spiritual herbs back from them. However, who would have thought that those spiritual herbs were actually beast-luring grass? They were overjoyed when they saw the spiritual grasses and left with them. In the end, it attracted wave after wave of magical beasts. If I hadn't run into Chu Yuqing on the way, I would have been saved. They still didn't know what would happen to them. Perhaps they had already been swallowed by those magical beasts and turned into underground fertilizer. However, although Chu Yuqing and the others had saved them, they were still in dire straits. Chu Ku'er and the others were in an extremely sorry state from being chased by the magical beasts. Not only were they covered in wounds, but their clothes were also torn to pieces by the sharp teeth and claws of those magical beasts as they fled. When Chu Yuqing and the others encountered them, Chu Ku'er and the others were practically running naked in the forest. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.